Okay, welcome back everybody. Max here, as always. Today we dive into chapter 4.2, World War I and the stab in the back. This is an interesting one. Before we proceed, as usual, I need to show you the Amazon page where you can find the book. Please go there, have a look. I introduce you the YouTube page, as usual. We are also on Rumble, and as usual, we are on Brighteon as well. So please do give us your support. Now, knowing what we know so far, with the dominance of these secret societies, one would expect that they would make a move. And they made probably the biggest move yet by instigating World War I. The plan was many years in the making, and it went off without a glitch. The historical implication of not only the war itself, but the amount of infiltration that preceded it is unmeasurable. During the turn of the century, 1900, Germany was a power to contend with and was the biggest Protestant country at the time. This was a great concern for the Jesuits, who, if you can recall, clearly said that, I quote, "I will conduct a ruthless war secretly or publicly against all heretics, Protestants and liberals, as I am instructed to do, to exterminate and destroy them of the whole earth, and that I will not spare age, sex, or class, and that I will hang up, burn, boil, cook, peel, strangle, and bury those shameful heretics, rip the stomachs and wombs of their wives, and crush their heads of their children against the wall, for the purpose to destroy the horrible race forever." End quote. Needless to say that Germany was a big problem if left with too much influence. Germany had also ventured into colonization as their neighbors, and had done so successfully. They had taken control of some African countries at the time, and this was not to the liking of the other colonizers, as competition obviously was frowned upon. Tensions between the blocs were rising since many years, and all that was needed was a trigger. The main alliance blocs in Europe at the time were called the Triple Entente, formed by France, Russia, and Great Britain, united all by fear and suspicion of Germany. The other faction was the Triple Alliance, formed by Germany, Austro-Hungary, a weakening empire at the time, first, had no successor to the throne, as his only son had committed suicide. Funny how that goes. His nephew, Franz Ferdinand, became the heir to the throne. Now, problems began immediately. Franz Ferdinand had very different political ideas from his uncle, and this led to many tensions, one of which was the integration of Serbia into the empire with equal status. Russia, on the other hand, who was Serbia's protector, as all the Slavic Balkans at the time, was not so keen on this idea as can be imagined. Prince Ferdinand travels to Serbia for discussions, where he is to be assassinated on 28th of June 1914 with his wife Sophie. The triggerman, a patsy, was called Gavrilo Princip, Bosnian Serb student. He died supposedly 4 years later of tuberculosis while incarcerated. Austro-Hungary obviously declared war on Serbia immediately, as would be customary in such events. I would bet my right kidney that Gavrilo was a paid patsy by the Zionist Illuminati at the time. I say this because it turns out that the Austro-Hungarian emperor was indeed a devoted Jesuit. He even had his own orders set up. My contention, and this is only speculation on my part, is that the emperor ordered the killing of his own nephew by order of his handlers, the Zionists Jesuit, Illuminati order. It was the perfect event to move forward with their plans. He might even have known that his empire was to be destroyed as a consequence. I don't know. Who could ever say? Germany has since long signed a defensive pact that it renewed in 1908, stating that it would stand by Austro-Hungary even if it had started the war. Germany had nothing whatsoever to gain from this war, but was dragged into it anyway. The Germans kept asking for peace all through the 4 years the wars lasted. A little-known fact is that Germany did not attack anyone whatsoever, in order to avoid any instigation from their side. But it was, as you can see on the screen, it was France who attacked them first. Very strangely, the exact same thing happened in World War II. The French invaded Germany first. Now, Germany was the last of the great European powers to mobilize their military. In order to kick off the war, the French, who were allied with Britain and Russia, had crossed into German territory on numerous occasions, even dropping bombs from the primitive airplanes of the day. Germany's two-front push against the Triple Entente powers and neutral Belgium was provoked and necessary for self-defense. Germany's war declaration correctly recited the fact that Germany had made every effort to resolve any differences peacefully, but that France interposed obstacles to a peaceful understanding. The first soldiers and the first bomb to cross borders were French going into Germany. As the war progressed, not much ground was gained by the Alliance forces except massive casualties. The Russians started suffering from the Bolshevik Revolution and had to withdraw their troops. Now, this was obviously all part of the plan. Britain was under a U-boat blockade, much like during World War II. Not one part of Germany has yet been occupied at this time. Germany was well on its way to win the war in December of 1916, and Kaiser Wilhelm, the man you will see on the screen now, he offered reasonable peace terms, calling off the war if things went back as they once were and to be left alone. You will see in further chapters when we speak of World War II the exact same story unfolding once again. Exactly the same. It's shocking. At this particular time, two Zionist Jays, Mr. Chaim Weizmann and Nahum Sokolov, that you see on the screen right now, approached the British with a very, very dirty deal. They offered to use their global influence to bring the USA into the war on Britain's side, while undermining and destroying Germany from within simultaneously. The price to be paid for this influence would be that the British would steal Palestine from the Ottoman Empire, which was Germany's ally at the time, and gift it to the Zionists, so the Jays could have a home that they could call their own. Now, this plot eventually led to the infamous Balfour Declaration that you see on the screen now, that granted in the future the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, and it was moderated by, drum roll please everybody, Walter Rothschild. Who could imagine? This document is probably the most evil document ever to be issued in history. It says, Foreign Office, November 2nd, 1917. This is after the war finished. It says, Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with the Jewish Zionist aspirations. which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use the best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Signed by Balfour himself. Now, as we move on, let's listen to this little clip of Jacob Rothschild describing the events that I lay upon you here.
It's 67 words long, it's 100 years old, and it changed the course of history for the Middle East and the Jewish people. The Balfour Declaration, the expression of the British government's support for a Jewish home in Palestine, was sent by British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to the second Lord Rothschild. I'm here in Buckinghamshire at Waddesdon Manor to speak with the fourth Lord Rothschild about the Balfour Declaration, what it means for Britain, for the Jewish people and the Rothschild family.
The Foreign Office, November the 2nd, 1917. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's Government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet.
So it's possibly the most famous letter in modern Jewish history, and it begins with 3 words: Dear Lord Rothschild. Why was it that this letter was sent by the Foreign Secretary to your great-uncle Walter?
It's an interesting question because he was really interested in ornithology, although he became interested in Zionism. I think the reason was this, that it was primarily a movement from Eastern Europe, but they didn't clarify who was in charge of that movement. And in addition, it was, after all, in Great Britain. So they felt that the Rothschild family should be the one to whom it was addressed. And Walter was Lord Rothschild, and he was a Zionist. And those really are the background reasons.
So Walter received the Balfour Declaration, and I have a copy here. And I wonder if I could possibly ask you to read it for us.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. I'm going to put on my spectacles to make sure I read it accurately. His Majesty's Government view with favour the establishment of Palestine as a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours, Arthur Balfour.
And here it is, the Balfour Declaration. What do you feel when you see it here?
I genuinely feel it's one of the most extraordinary moments in the history of the Jewish people. If you think it took 3,000 years to get to this, and then you say, how did this miracle happen? It's the most incredible piece of opportunism. I mean, if you think you had an impoverished would-be scientist, Chaim Weizmann, who somehow gets to England, meets a few people, including members of my family, seduces them. He has such great charm and conviction. He gets to Balfour, and he unbelievably persuades Balfour and Lloyd George, the Prime Minister, and most of the ministers, that this idea of the national home for Jews should be allowed to take place. I mean, it's so unlikely. And then He's, starts to fight a difficult battle with the British cabinet, and this letter goes through 5 drafts, as you know. And in the end, it comes out as a rather compromising letter. I mean, the essential point is there for the Jewish community to fasten on to. You have the first bit, which promises a national home rather than the national home. And then you have the bit that nothing that's to be done should in any way harm the Arab community. But you come back to the big point, which is that this is perhaps the greatest event in Jewish life for thousands of years. And it's a miracle that it took place.
And of course, the Rothschild family then as now filled 2 roles, because it wasn't just a leader of diaspora Jewry. It also played a very significant role in the early years of the establishment of the pioneer communities in Israel as well.
There were 2 branches of the Rothschild family primarily concerned. One in France through Baron Edmond de Rothschild, who was the one who responded to the Russian programs of the 1880s. In England, there was a divide. Some of the Rothschilds, in particular Baron Edmond's son, James, known as Jimmy, had come from France, partly because of the Dreyfus case and his horror about what had happened, to live in England. He was educated at Cambridge University. And he married an English girl, Mrs. James de Rothschild, and she became a leader at a very young age. She was only 17 when she started writing to Weizmann and introducing him to the British establishment. Other Rothschilds felt it was better to be assimilated into English life, and although they retained their interest in Judaism and Jewish life, they didn't think it was a good thing that this national home should be established in Israel. So it was something that divided my family, as with many other families.
I wonder, as somebody who moves in the highest echelons of British society and is very close to Israel, whether you in your life feel a tension between concern for Israel and loyalty to Britain?
No, I don't personally feel that. I mean, I've been completely committed to Israel since the early 1960s and have been there every year since. So I don't feel that conflict, but I, of course, feel huge loyalty to Great Britain.
Just tell us a little bit more about Walter, the second Lord Rothschild, because he was an unusual and colourful character.
He was a deeply eccentric man, but from a very early age his passion was collecting. He rode about Tring Park on a giant tortoise. He had a zebra carriage.
A carriage pulled by zebras?
Yes. He collected on a massive scale birds, insects, fleas,
it was
butterflies.
The largest single collection created by a single individual.
I think that's true. I think certainly in Great Britain, I think probably anywhere, he was the greatest collector of ornithological material.
His niece, Miriam, writes that for 2 years, as one of his eccentricities, he didn't open any of the letters that were sent to him and stuffed them away into wicker baskets. And it does make you wonder what would have happened if the Balfour Declaration, the letter, had been one of those letters that he'd actually,
yes,
stuffed.
That's true. At that stage, and it's very difficult to quite understand why, he had taken a deep interest in what was happening about the possibility of Balfour Declaration. So maybe those letters would have got to the top of his file.
I just want to revisit for a moment your cousin Dorothy, who you mentioned, who at an extraordinarily young age, still in her teens, played such a critical role as a go-between and a facilitator for Chaim Weizmann. Can you say a little bit about
Well,
that?
she married my cousin Jimmy when she was 17.
So this is your cousin Dorothy, Dolly.
Yep, Mrs. James de Rothschild.
And from her teenage years onwards, she was a major supporter of Israel, wasn't she?
Major supporter. I mean, she worshipped her husband, who'd been deeply committed, son of Baron Edmore. It was due to him, I think, that she became interested, but once she became interested, she became passionately interested. After his death, she became even more committed. She just wanted to carry out his wishes and what he cared deeply about. And then she had her own personality, a deeply good human being who was quite unselfish. She devoted herself to this place, to Israel, and to a few friends, and had a wonderful life. And you can read letters from her to Weizmann and from Weizmann to her when she was only 17. And what she did, which was crucially important, was to connect up Weizmann with the British establishment.
I think she also trained him in how to deal. She helped educate how to
and it's
conduct himself.
At that age, but she did sort of tell Weizmann, how to kind of integrate, how to insert himself into British establishment life, which he learned very quickly.
So I'm here in the Waddesdon Manor archives, where there is a treasure trove of remarkable documents from the time of the Balfour Declaration. We have the correspondence here between the teenage Dorothy and her husband James, and it's really a love story. Here Dorothy is writing to James. She says, "Jimmy, I thought I would not like one day to pass without giving you a piece of news you have never heard before. I love you." But of course their correspondence wasn't just romantic correspondence. Here we have detailed letters describing her dealings with Zionist leaders, her advice and her suggestions regarding the conferences of the Zionist movement. And here we have a letter that the young Dorothy, still not 20, sent to Dr. Chaim Weizmann, where she's talking about the meetings that she's arranged for him. And as we've heard, she was helpful in training and preparing him to enter into the highest echelons of British society to advance the cause of the Zionist movement. And she was an important character in your life as well. She really introduced you to Israel in some way.
She was a crucially important character in my life. I became a trustee of Yad Hanadiv over 50 years ago.
Which is the Rothschild Philanthropic Foundation.
Yes, being our foundation. And I think I first went in 1962.
Can you share with us your sense of what things have been changing in Israel since that first visit?
Yes. As Israel, I think, became more and more successful in all sorts of ways, industrially successful, absorption successful, technologically successful, great universities, the problems with the wars that took place, being the clearest examples, of security became more paramount. And so you did see a shift in Israel from kind of the liberal Western place that it had been in the early 60s to something of a very different character. And you also have a shift, of course, between communities in Israel. I mean, Israel is a patchwork of different immigrants from different countries. And you have the religious, you have the non-religious, you have a town like Tel Aviv, which is attractive to the kind of business community, to what I would call ordinary city life. And then you have Jerusalem, which remains a very religious city and full of conflict between Arab neighbors and itself.
Those internal issues within the fabric of Israeli society are one of the main focuses of Yad Hanadiv. Can you mention just one or two of the projects that feel to you most significant?
Yes, we do a great deal of work on education, a great deal of academic work. We keep going at Ramat Hanadiv, the garden where Baron Edmond was eventually buried. We're on the point of building the new National Library of Israel. I have two unexpected ones, perhaps. If you take the Orthodox community, it's important that they have employment. and we're trying to develop programs which it's possible for them to undertake. Similarly, we have a problem with Arab unemployment, and we set up jointly with the government employment centres to facilitate greater employment of Arabs within Israel. And so we're an active foundation trying to help with these fissures in Israeli life and to do some good.
And we're sitting here looking forward to the 100th anniversary of this significant letter. If I can just ask you to think about the next centennial, 100 years' time, and just maybe share some of your hopes, your aspirations about where Israel will be.
What does one hope for? One, of course, hopes for a peaceful relationship with Israel's neighbours, and that's going to be.
So, that's from the horse's mouth. Jacob Rothschild, who recently passed away. May he rest in peace forever. He forgets to mention the fact, obviously, that the entire operation of the Balfour Declaration was blackmail, because that's exactly what it was. These were Zionists who set up an operation to blackmail the British in order to establish this home. The ending of Palestine, and they have been at war ever since, right? It's just a tragic and horrendous thing. So as we all know, the Middle East has been at war ever since, and that, my friends, was not a coincidence, just a part of a very long and methodical plan. The same Zionists in Europe also pressured their counterparts in America to convince President Wilson to enter the war. The usual suspects were activated in lockstep: Warburg, Schiff, Bernard Baruch, who I have not mentioned yet, but was also instrumental in the Federal Reserve scam. British airplanes started dropping leaflets in Germany, written in Yiddish, talking about the Balfour Declaration and thus galvanizing the J community internally in the country. J-owned media started releasing massive amounts of anti-German propaganda inside the country, as you can see on your screen here, thus depicting the Germans as brutes and barbaric. After that, the Marxist movement in Germany started strikes in the factories, which weakened the German war effort substantially. Needless to say, at that point, if the Americans were not tricked into the war, millions of lives would have been saved, and the war should have ended right there and then. As the Germans were obviously winning, right? So how did America eventually join the war? Well, it was a false flag, of course. Trickery and deceit. Classic Khazarian mafia style. Watch this wonderful clip by a hero of mine, Eric Dubay, who explains how America was brought into the war.
World War I officially began on June 28, 1914, when members of the Illuminati Black Hand secret society assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Europe quickly polarized and warred for nearly a year before Americans were given their false flag reason to join. On May 1, 1915, the British naval cruiser Lusitania was scheduled for Liverpool, taking off from New York Harbor, loaded with 600 tons of explosives, 6 million pounds of ammunition, 1,248 cases of shrapnel shells, other war materials, and last but not least, American passengers. The German embassy in D.C. was fully aware of the war materials being shipped into England on the Lusitania and tried to warn the American travelers. German embassy officials attempted to place full-page ads in 50 U.S. newspapers reading, "Notice, travelers intending to embark on the Atlantic voyage are reminded that a state of war exists between Germany and her allies and Great Britain and her allies." Travelers sailing in the war zone on ships of Great Britain do so at their own risk. Due to actions taken by the U.S. State Department, 49 of those 50 newspapers never ran the ad. Gary Allen wrote, "The same crowd which manipulated the passage of the income tax and the Federal Reserve System wanted America in the war. J.P. Morgan, John D. Rockefeller, Colonel House, Jacob Schiff, Paul Warburg, and the rest of the Jekyll Island conspirators were all deeply involved in getting us involved. Many of these financiers had loaned England large sums of money. In fact, J.P. Morgan and Company served as British financial agents in this country during World War I. The German government took out large ads in all the New York papers, warning potential passengers that the ship was carrying munitions and telling them not to cross the Atlantic on it. Yet the sinking of the Lusitania was used by clever propagandists to portray the Germans as inhuman slaughterers of innocents. Submarine warfare was manufactured into a cause célèbre to push us into war. Midday, May 7th, off the coast of Ireland, the Lusitania was ordered to reduce speed, and Juno, its British military escort vessel, was ordered to withdraw. Committee of 300, 33rd degree Freemason, and Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill, knew German U-boats were in the vicinity and purposely called off Juno, leaving the Lusitania a sitting duck. Jim Marrs wrote, "British Commander Joseph Kenworthy, on duty when the ship was sunk, later revealed that her military escort was withdrawn at the last minute, and her captain ordered to enter at reduced speed an area where a German U-boat was known to be operating. It is clear why Germany attacked this ship, and Britain would have done the same if U.S. munitions were being shipped to Germany. The Germans, whose torpedo struck the liner, were the unwitting accomplices, or victims, of a plot probably concocted by Winston Churchill." Fritz Springmeier wrote, "The Lusitania was a ploy. It was packed with some Morgan-owned ammunition, had been given over to England as a member of the Navy, and despite the warnings of the Germans, was sent into a naval war zone, specifically to be a target, the catalyst for America's entrance into the war. Churchill ordered the Lusitania's naval escort to return to port, and the fated ship was left unprotected to be sunk. Rothschild agent Colonel House probably knew of this plot. Records point to a discussion of it between him and Sir Edward Grey of England. Historian Colin Simpson called the sinking of the Lusitania, quote, "the foulest act of willful murder ever committed on the seas." Churchill's fellow Committee of 300 member, CFR founder, and Rothschild agent Colonel Mandell House was also President Wilson's top political advisor. Wilson said, "Mr. House is my second personality. He is my independent self. His thoughts and mine are one. If I were in his place, I would just do as he suggested." This is a man who has also been called the Henry Kissinger of his day. In the book The Intimate Papers of Colonel House is a conversation recorded between Colonel House and the Foreign Secretary of England, Sir Edward Grey. Grey asked, "What will America do if the Germans sink an ocean liner with American passengers on board?" And House answered, "I believe that a flame of indignation would sweep the United States, and that by itself would be sufficient to carry us into the war." Just as luck would have it, that is exactly what happened. Around 1,200 were killed, including 128 Americans. This act set off a firestorm of anti-German feeling throughout the United States, fanned by the Rockefeller-Morgan-dominated press. So Illuminati Morgan-owned ammunition was loaded on a ship with American passengers. Committee of 300 and 33rd degree Mason Winston Churchill ordered off the ship's military escort, knowing German U-boats were standing by. Then the Rockefeller-Morgan-dominated U.S. press helped stir anti-German sentiment until the people were sufficiently propagandized to enter the war. President Woodrow Wilson, like Winston Churchill, the Morgans, and Rockefellers, knew of the Lusitania's pre-planned fate, and he knew the decision to sink it was out of his hands. Colin Simpson wrote, "There can be no doubt that President Wilson was told of the character of the cargo destined for the Lusitania. He did nothing, but was to concede on the day he was told of her sinking that his foreknowledge had given him many sleepless hours. Gary Allen wrote, Woodrow Wilson was re-elected by a hair. He had based his campaign on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." Just 5 months later, we were in it. The same crowd which manipulated the passage of the income tax and the Federal Reserve System wanted America in the war. J.P. Morgan, John D. Rockefeller, Colonel House, Jacob Schiff, Paul Warburg, and the rest of the Jekyll Island conspirators were all deeply involved. World War I was a financial bonanza for the international bankers, but it was a catastrophe of such magnitude for the United States that few even today grasp its importance. The war reversed our traditional foreign policy of non-involvement, and we have been enmeshed almost constantly ever since in perpetual wars for perpetual peace. Winston Churchill once observed that all nations would have been better off had the U.S. minded its own business. Had we done so, he said, quote, peace would have been made with Germany, and there would have been no collapse in Russia leading to communism, no breakdown of government in Italy followed by fascism, and Nazism never would have gained ascendancy in Germany.
So, isn't it really interesting when we look back at these events and we look at 1912 when they sank the Titanic, which supposedly led to the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, right? We already spoke about that. So then they did this. It seems like sinking of ships was the preferred method to get the point across at the time. So now you start to see a picture emerging. The propaganda and influence of the J-controlled media, backroom deals and promises are now prevalent and part of the ways of Zion, just as described in their protocols, to the letter. Germany and Austro-Hungary kept pleading for peace several times, and even Wilson had to admit that they had indeed offered generous peace proposals, but ended up dismissing them all. The Germans, after being battered, had to agree for unconditional surrender and disarmament in 1918. Approximately 40 million people died between military and civilians, all for a war that Germany wanted no part of. If you think this is bad, wait until we talk about World War II and Hitler, the ultimate revenge. Communist and Zionist countrymen had stabbed the Germans in the back, and this is what is still called today the stab in the back. In the next chapter, we will discuss the consequences. So, after this little history lesson, I think that's all for me today. We will discuss the next chapter, which is 4.3, the Versailles Treaty and the Silent Takeover, next. So that's all for me today. Max out. Peace to you all. Fucking